This is the KRISS Vector. Well, technically it's two KRISS Vectors. Today we're putting the 9mm and the 45 ACP versions head to head to answer a question most Tarkov players get wrong. Which vector should you actually be running? And after testing both versions across budget builds, meta builds, ammo options, and range performance, I found something I wasn't expecting. One vector dominates the late wipe, the other might actually be the better choice for a huge chunk of the season. By the end of this video, we'll crown a winner for early wipe, mid wipe, and late wipe, and you might realize you've been using the wrong vector the entire time. Let's start with what most people see first, the stats. At first glance, this doesn't even look like a fair fight. The 9mm vector comes in at under 3 kilograms with 75 ergo and only 37 vertical recoil. On paper, that's everything you want from an SMG. Fast, light, easy to control, and meanwhile, the 45 ACP starts with 70 ergo and 45 vertical recoil. Not terrible, but definitely not winning the stat sheet. So the 9mm wins immediately, right? Well, not exactly, because there's one stat most players completely ignore, and that's fire rate. The 9mm vector fires at 950 rounds per minute. The 45 ACP fires at an insane 1100 rounds per minute, over 150 additional rounds every minute. Now, obviously Tarkov fights don't last a full minute, and that's under ideal circumstances, but that extra fire rate means the 45 can dump damage into a target significantly faster. If the ammo can keep up, the WIS base stats may not actually matter nearly as much as they appear. On raw stats alone, the 9mm takes the final point, but the next category is where things start getting interesting. Because Tarkov isn't played on a spreadsheet, it's played with bullets. And this is where the 45 finally has a chance to fight back early on. Looking at the ammo chart, the first thing you'll notice is that the 9mm has twice as many options. Early on, you'll mostly be looking at PST or GT. Later on a wipe, you'll transition to AP 6.3 and eventually PvP. PvP brings 39 penetration while still maintaining solid damage, making it one of the strongest 9mm rounds in the game. The 45 ACP lineup is much smaller. Early on, you're realistically looking at match FMJ unless you're trying to remove some of the kneecaps with whip rounds. Once AP becomes available though, things get interesting. 45 AP brings 38 penetration, putting it almost neck to neck with PvP. So if the endgame ammo is basically tied, why does the 45 get a point here? Because of when you get access to it. You can start mass producing 45 AP significantly earlier than most players can consistently stockpile PvP. That means during mid-wipe, the 45 often reaches its peak power before the 9mm does. Now the 9mm has more options, sure, but the 45 gets its better ammo sooner. Now we finally get to the part that surprised me, because one of these cheapest builds in this entire video came way closer to the middle builds than I expected. First up is the budget 45 ACP Vector. This build comes in at roughly 119,000 rubles and honestly surprised me more than I expected. For that price, you're getting 50 ergo, only 38 vertical recoil. Those aren't just good budget numbers. Those are numbers that start creeping into territory normally reserved for much more expensive weapon builds. What I like most about this build though is that it knows exactly what it's trying to be. Not trying to be meta, it's not trying to dominate every fight, it's trying to give you the most performance possible for the least amount of money. And it succeeds. Just have 3 bad raids in a row, your stash value is starting to look depressing. This is the build I'd start with when rebuilding that well. At the range, the recoil is surprisingly manageable, even with the match FMJ. The 30 round magazines force you to think about your shots a little bit more. But if you're disciplined, this thing can absolutely punch above its weight class. And remember, once 45 AP enters the picture, this build becomes significantly scarier. So right now, the 45 takes the lead, but now is the time for the budget build most players would probably choose on paper. Budget 9 Vector comes in a little more expensive at around 156,000 rubles, but the extra money gets you something immediately noticeable. 68 ergo, 32 vertical recoil. Those are ridiculous numbers for a budget build. Purely from a handling standpoint, it completely outclasses the budget 45. The thing feels less like a SMG and more like a laser pointer with anger issues. Short bursts stay incredibly tight. Target transitions are effortless. And if all you're looking at are the weapon stats, this is the obvious winner. But there's a catch. Ammo. Best 9mm ammo is noticeably harder to stockpile than 45 AP during the part of the wipe where most people are actually building these weapons. And that's what keeps this from being an automatic victory. At the range though, this thing is beautiful. Smooth recoil, fast follow-up, very little effort required to stay on target. One of the easiest weapons to Tarkov to control, I argue. Right now, we're kinda tied. And this is where I expected 9mm to stop really running away with the competition. Then I looked at the meta builds. If you don't want to get doinked down like the goons did here, make sure you like and subscribe so that way you never miss a breakdown and that way you always stay ahead of the game. When most players think of the Vector, this is probably the version they're imagining. Big drum magazine, premium attachments, and top tier ammo. This is the full Tarkov experience. First thing that stands out is capacity. The 50 round drum mag allows you to fully take advantage of that 950 RPM fire rate without consistently worrying about reload. That alone makes the weapon significantly more forgiving than its 45 counterpart you'll see. Stat-wise, we're sitting at 46 ergo and 32 vertical recoil, which is honestly ridiculous. Most weapons would kill for numbers like that. Even running PvP, which adds recoil, this gun remains incredibly controllable. And because PvP carries 39 penetration, you can confidently challenge heavily armored players without feeling undergunned. Build excels at exactly what the Vector was designed to do. Close range aggression, quick pushes, wound clearing, and fast reaction. If you're the first person shooting, there's a very good chance you're the last person standing. At the range, the results were exactly what you expect. Minimum effort, minimum recoil, but maximum violence. So the 9mm takes the lead, but the 45 isn't finished yet. And this next build is the reason this entire comparison became more interesting than I actually expected. The meta 45 ACP Vector is the underdog of this entire video. Most players never seriously consider it once they unlock the 9mm version. After testing it, I think that's a mistake. First thing you'll notice is the ergo, 60 ergo. That's nearly 15 points higher than a meta 9mm build. And unlike recoil, where small differences become harder to feel at lower values, every point of ergo remains variable. The faster you can ADS, faster you can react, faster you can put the first round on target, and in Tarkov, first shots win fight. Now here's the downside, recoil. Weapon sits around 42 vertical recoil before ammunition penalty. Once you load 45 AP, you're pushing closer to 50 true recoil. Still controllable, but definitely less forgiving. Then there's magazine capacity. This is the biggest weakness, I argue. The 30 round magazines disappear fast when you're firing 1100 rounds per minute, very fast. Miss a few shots and you immediately feel the difference when your gun goes click. Compared to the 9mm drum magazine setup, ammo management becomes much more important. Here's the trade-off. The 45 hits hard, fire rate is absurd, and the AP ammunition remains competitive all the way through the entire wipe. This build rewards precision, it rewards discipline, and it rewards experienced players. At the range, intentional burst firing produced significantly better results than just mag dumping. Once I adjusted my playstyle, the weapon started making a very convincing argument for itself, which means after all that was somehow tied going to the final verdict. So let's answer the question, which Vector wins? And the answer depends entirely on where you are in the wipe. We're talking early wipe, neither. You're probably running whatever scat weapon you can get your hands on, but once players start unlocking skill level 3 and building actual kits, the conversation does change. For mid-wipe, the winner is the 45 ACP Vector. Earlier access to AP ammunition, cheaper effective build, faster fire rate, and enough stopping power to shred most armor you'll encounter at that stage. And higher. 45 reaches its peak much sooner, but eventually the wipe does progress. Players get rich, UP becomes easier to acquire, and magazine capacity starts becoming more important for extended fights. That's where the 9mm takes over. For the late wipe, the winner is obviously the 9mm Vector. Lower recoil, larger magazines, terrible penetration, and much greater forgiveness. Overall, easier experience used effectively. The 45 is the better specialist option, the 9mm is the better all-rounder. So if you're asking which Vector I'd choose with unlimited money, give me the 9mm. Now if you're asking which Vector I'd rush during mid-wipe, 45 wins instantly. Honestly, that's the part most people are overlooking between these two. 9mm gets all the attention because of its incredible endgame potential. 45 does some of its best work long before most players ever switch over. Now it's your turn. Which Vector are you taking to raid? Tell me why I'm wrong in the comments, and I'll see you howling in the next one.